Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, we are back here for the seminar series. We are back here for the Meteorological virtual seminar series. Prof. Flip, can you share your screen, please? Prof. Lamte,
can you hear me?
Can you give us, yes, we can hear you now. Can you give us some brief, then Prof. Philip will take it up from there.
Okay. So good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This seminar series actually has a background from an existing project. It's called the Science and Weather Information for Forecasting Techniques, the SWIFT project. And as part of the legacy of that project, the project actually is led by the University of Leeds and involves institutions from Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, and Niger, which is Ahmad. The uniqueness of this project is that it involves universities as well as operational centers. So if you take Ghana, we have KNUST and the Ghana Meteorological Agency, both being part of this project. You go to Senegal and you have ANASIM, which is the equivalent of GMET, Ghana Meteo, and the University of Sheikh Anta Diop, and similar things happen in Kenya and Nigeria. So that's the uniqueness of this project. And the beauty is that this project focuses on an area which has not been, in addition to the normal meteorological, the scientific aspect, this project also focuses on an area which most scientific projects don't do, which is evaluation and then user engagement. And but this one of the work packages is on user engagement, the other one is on verification and evaluation. So today, the first talk was more of the physical science. And today's talk by Professor Philip, Professor Antwi-Agyei, is also looking at the other side. We are moving away from the physical science and looking at a complementary side to the project, or to actually the project points to operational activity. So to the activities which complements each other. So we have Professor Philip Antwi-Agyei talking about co-production, like generating climate information and the way to do it in such a way that the information is usable and relevant to the user is what he's going to talk about. Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor Philip.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for logging in to listen to this talk. And let me also take this opportunity to thank the organizers for putting this together. I am Philip Antwi-Agyei from the Department of Environmental Science, KNUST in Kumasi. For those of you who are not in Ghana, please. I will turn off my video at some point because of the sometimes the issues with disruptions and other things. So what I'm going to be talking this morning on is on opportunities and challenges of co-producing and using climate information. And I'll try and then use an evidence from smallholder farmers in the Upper East region of Ghana. As part of some of the works I've done there, as part of a fellowship that I was on, and then the SWIFT project. So in terms of my presentation outline, I'll start by looking at why Sub-Saharan Africa is the most vulnerable region, and then look at how climate change is a threat to Ghana's socio-economic development, and then the potential of climate information to address adaptation issues, and then run through the other key areas. I want to start the presentation by quoting this lifting this code from the IPCC special report on global warming of 1.5, which was launched in 2018. It stated categorically that humanity will need to make unprecedented changes to avoid extreme heat, floods, and poverty. And it continued by saying that this is particularly important in the context of many developing countries where adaptive capacity is quite low. And of course, Ghana is one of such countries where our adaptive capacity is low for a number of reasons. Sub-Saharan Africa, even though contributes far less in terms of the global greenhouse gases emission, we contribute less than 5%, according to the IPCC assessment report in 2014. Yet, the continent is regarded, or the Sub-Saharan Africa is regarded as the most vulnerable when it comes to the adverse impacts of climate change. And this is due to a number of factors, and the first one includes the fact that we have weak adaptive capacity. Also, we have high poverty levels. And then in terms of infrastructure, we have low infrastructure or weak infrastructure development. And then most of our economies across the region depend predominantly on rain-fed or agro-based system or climate-sensitive sectors such as agriculture and forestry, which provide livelihoods to thousands or millions of people in this region. When you come to Ghana, you realize that Ghana also has a peculiar situation, even though there are uncertainties in terms of how rainfall and temperature will change, but there's a general consensus amongst scientists that temperature will increase and rainfall will become more variable or erratic across all the agroecological zones of the country. We are experiencing the effects of climate change already all over the place. Dry lines, our dams are drying up, and then climate change induced floods are also happening, especially Accra, Kumasi, and some parts of the country. These then threaten the attainment of the commitments that were made in the form of the nationally determined contributions, that is the adaptation and mitigation commitments that were highlighted under the Paris Agreement, and then as well as the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goals relating to food security, poverty reduction, and then climate action for that matter. While this paints a very gloomy picture of what pertains in the case of Ghana, there's a growing body of literature which suggests that access to timely climate information by smallholder farmers could help them to maintain productivity and build their resilience to climate change in the face of changing rainfall patterns. So if farmers can get readily usable and accessible and timely climate information, they'll be able to build the adaptive capacity. So I want to present a case study from the Upper East region, which is in Northeast Ghana, for those of you who are not in Ghana. And the aim of this case study was to assess how climate information can be mainstream to strengthen the resilience of agricultural systems to support sustainable development in the country. So a specific objective included, one, to exploit the kinds of climate information available to farmers in the Upper East region. Two, to identify the opportunities for using climate information in building resilient agricultural systems. And three was to assess the barriers to the uptake of climate forecast or information in the Upper East region. And then finally, to determine the predictors of access and willingness to pay for climate information in the Upper East region. So I want to define certain terms. When you talk of climate information in this context, I'm referring to both short-term weather forecasts through seasonal forecast to long-term climate change information on decadal time scales. And then when you talk of co-production, we are simply referring to how do we bring people together, bringing producers of weather and climate information with those who actually use this information to make decisions in that matter. And in the context of farmers, farmers use climate information to make important cropping and farm management choices or decisions. And when you are bringing them together with producers of weather, then you are doing co-production. In terms of the study methods that were employed for this work, the study employed ethnographic fieldwork that allowed the lived experiences of smallholder farmers in the Upper East region, which is considered to be a climate change vulnerability hotspot, to be examined and explored in the context of the specific objectives that I have already mentioned. So there were 3 phases in terms of the methods. The first phase involved interactive stakeholder workshops, which were held in Bolgatanga, Navrongo in the Kasina-Nankana Municipal, Zibila in the Boku West, and then Tongo in the Talensi district. The essence of these stakeholder workshops was to understand the governance process and structures at the regional and district levels for mainstreaming climate information or co-producing climate information, and also to identify the challenges for maintaining or for mainstreaming climate information into district and regional plans and programs for that matter. To do that, 3 local assemblies, that is Kasina-Nankana Municipal, which represented urban area, Talensi District, which represented a rural area, and then Boku West, which was considered as a semi-urban in the Upper East region, were selected based on their levels of climate vulnerability and advice from agricultural development officers in the region. And then within each local assembly, 2 communities were selected based on information obtained through interviews with local extension officers and agricultural development officers. So we selected Vonoinia and Sabulo from Kasina-Nankana, Tili and Yurugu from the Boku West district, and then Tindongo and Yabraga from the Talensi district of the Upper East region. So the second phase, what we did was that we ran a number of households questionnaire surveys. We ran 555 across 6 study communities in 3 districts in September and October of 2019. And the essence of this household survey was to understand the types of climate information available to different socioeconomic groups, what were the opportunities for using this climate information, and then the communication pathway to the end user, in this case, the smallholder farmers. In addition to that, we also had what we call focus group discussions were held. I think we had 12 in all in 6 communities. What happened was that we had 2 in each community, and there were separate discussions for male and female focus groups. This was necessitated in the sense that we realized that in the context of where we were doing this work, cultural and other beliefs and values meant that we needed to separate the male and female so as to be able to get both groups to speak to the issues that we were discussing in terms of co-producing, in terms of the kind of climate information they were assessing and they were getting used to. The third phase involved key informant and expert interviews with district and regional agricultural and development planners across the Upper East region, and then agricultural extension officers and agents, and other NGOs and civil society organizations. NGOs include World Visions and other Action Aid and other NGOs located and working within the Upper East region. So the qualitative data that were obtained from these key informant interviews and focus group discussions were coded and indexed and analyzed through what we call intensive content analysis. And this allowed the major themes or the major responses that emerged to be identified in that order. And then the econometric estimation was also done to understand or to investigate the socioeconomic predictors that influence access to and willingness to pay for climate information. So we did a simple regression analysis, which was done using Stata. And to do that, we had 3 procedures that we used to do that. So the analysis was performed following a disaggregated procedure where we had 3 procedures involved. The baseline regression involved a global analysis where all the data were used in the estimation, and then later a gendered perspective was then applied in the 2nd and 3rd stages following the global analysis. And then we employed the Haussmann test to select the best fit model for access and willingness to pay for climate information. So I'll present some of the overviews of the key findings, or the overview of the key findings here. In terms of receipts of climate information, we realized that about 60% of those that were sampled randomly from this state community said that they were receiving some kind of climate information, and this spread across both males and female, which then suggests that a considerable number of farmers were not receiving climate information. That's about 60%, 40% of them were not receiving climate information. And this is quite a worrying situation, looking at the fact that farmers in this part of the country depend entirely on rain-fed agricultural systems. And if they are not receiving the necessary information to enable them to plan the adaptation practices, then it's a worrying situation. I mean, in the past, smallholder farmers have often depended on their agroecological knowledge to determine the patterns of the rainfall. Some of them use their indigenous knowledge of the weather, the appearance of certain birds, and the flowering of certain tree species. But because of things, the fact that things have changed, they are no longer able to use and rely solely on these kinds of science and local knowledge. Then we also wanted to find out the kind of climate variables being received by smallholder farmers. And we realized that out of the 335 farmers who said they were receiving some form of climate information, many of them were receiving information relating to rainfall in the area. Some were also receiving some information regarding temperature and then windstorm. This also spread nicely across both males and females within the study communities. Then we also wanted to find out the kind of medium they were using to receive climate information. And to do that, we found out that radio was the most prominent method being used to receive climate information in this area. Radio broadcasts in the during the day sometimes come out with some level of climate information for farmers, especially with regards to temperature and other climate variables. Mobile testing, mobile test messaging was also another thing being used, and then phone voice messaging. And this is being piloted by private companies such as Isoko and then Farmerline, which operate in the Upper East and some parts of the country. I mean, these findings are corroborate other previous funding by Partey and the rest in Upper West region, which suggests that radio remain one of the most prominent medium for receiving climate information. And even there was a paper by Nyantechi Hansen Frimpong, which also suggested similar experiences. Extension officers, social media, and community groups were the least media in terms of receiving climate information. Then we wanted to highlight when farmers receive this information, what were they using this information for? These were the opportunities. And this table shows that smallholder farmers are using climate information to make several important or critical farming and cropping choices decisions. A considerable number of them indicated that when they receive this information, it helps them to prepare their land. For those of us who know the Upper East region, from late October or from November to May, there's no rains, and then they need to prepare their lands in anticipation of the rainfall for planting. And if they can receive information on that, it helps them to be able to do that. Some were also using it to make choices in terms of the crop variety to plant, as well as the harvesting time decisions, and then crop risk management, and in addition to planting time adjustments. Farmers are adjusting their planting times as a climate change adaptation response. But if they don't have the necessary information in terms of climate information, they are not able to make such important farm decisions. Then importantly, we wanted to find out what barriers constrain the uptake of climate information within these parts of the country. A considerable number of the farmers who were sampled indicated that there's inadequate information on seasonal forecasts for long-term planning. And these are some of the things that we can pick from some of these studies. They highlighted that it's difficult to make long-term planning based on some of the seasonal forecasts that is given to them. Farmers need to make decisions in terms of when the rain will stop, the distribution of the rain during the farming season. And if they're not able to get this kind of information, they're not able to make important farm decisions for their farm enterprise. Then high illiteracy levels was also a major issue. The northern region, comprising the three northern regions, northern region proper, Upper East and Upper West, have the highest illiteracy rates across the country. And because of that, sometimes it affects how farmers are able to uptake, assess, and use some of this climate information. Then lack of reliability of climate information or climate forecasts. About 63% said that they sometimes have issues with credibility or reliability. This is maybe attributed to the fact that some of them might have been, some of the forecasts might not have reflected in what they seem to suggest, or some of them may not have helped them in the past, said that they are now cautious and they are now a little bit careful in terms of relying on some of these forecasts. But we also need to acknowledge the fact that sometimes some of these forecasts is given across a very large area, and it becomes difficult to get it realized or reflected in every locality for that matter. One of the key important issues was the misalignment between the kind of information that is provided and the information that is needed by smallholder farmers. This was highlighted by or reported by 54% of the 335 smallholder farmers who were sampled in the 6 communities. And some also indicated that the information is sometimes too difficult, which was reported by another 54%. These findings compare favorably with other studies in other parts of Africa that suggest that there's a disconnection sometimes between producers and users of climate information. That's sometimes constrain the uptake of climate information for farming decision making. So to overcome such issues related to misalignment, it's important that climate information is co-produced with the end users, and this will ensure appreciation and ownership of such information when they are eventually produced. Then the second part of the presentation, I wouldn't use so much time here, was to assess willingness to assess and pay for climate information. To do this, we used 2 case study, two study communities within the Boko West and then Kasina Nankana municipal, that is the Tili from Boko West, and then Vanonia from the Kasina Nankana municipality. So we wanted to find out the kind of forecast they were receiving: seasonal forecast, monthly forecast, weekly forecast, daily forecast, and windstorms. I think the most one they were receiving, some of them highlighted seasonal forecast, and then monthly forecast was also highlighted. But daily forecast, of course, every now and then, I think we give daily forecast at the end of the news. So it was reported by 36% of the number of people that were sampled within these two communities. They were 193 smallholder farmers. So we wanted to, the regression analysis was to help us to understand what kinds of socioeconomic factors determines the accessibility or willingness of farming households to pay for climate information. And these kind of studies or questions are important in the sense that if we want to commercialize some of these things, we need to be aware who are the people willing to pay, how much are they willing to pay, and is it worth going into some kinds of commercial production of this. I know GMET is not doing that because it's a government body which is supposed to produce and share this freely with end users. So to do that, as I mentioned earlier, we use a regression to do that. The parameter estimates that we did suggest that, and the marginal effect results of the logistic regression suggest that socioeconomic factors, including age, gender, level of farming experiences, training, credit facility, asset ownership, could all affect access to climate information. We all agree that in terms of farming experience, the more farmers, the more years farmers have spent in farming, the less likelihood for them to resort to climate information from forecasts, in the sense that as farmers continue to farm, they develop a rich or a wealth of indigenous agroecological knowledge that they use to inform some of the important decisions that they take on the farm. So you expect younger farmers to be able to assess climate information and use them for their farming activities compared to older farmers. And then experience of drought. We also felt that those who have experienced drought in the past were more likely to assess climate information based on their experience of experiencing drought in the past. Then others, including training, people who have been exposed to training in one way or the other in the form of climate information, were also willing or more likely to assess climate information. And then more importantly, I've highlighted here those who are members of a particular social group or membership of a social group suggests that said farmers are more likely to assess climate information. What happens is that during, as part of this membership, farmers are able to share climate information among themselves, and farmers are also able to tell other farmers what climate information could do, and this prompts other farmers to look for climate information to make important decisions as far as their farming enterprise may be concerned. Then, of course, the educational level and other things. Then we wanted to also look at what factors or socioeconomic factors were important when it comes to willingness to pay for climate information. And we realized that a number of factors were important when it comes to the decision to pay for climate information. So if you look at the parameter estimates and the marginal effects suggest that gender differences in farmers' willingness to pay for receiving climate information in the study area, which is the northeastern Ghana. I mean, for instance, the probability that a smallholder farmer will be willing to pay for the cost of receiving climate information will increase by 18.1 points when the farmer is a male rather than a female. And this are shown in the tables that we highlighted. There also struggle for food. Household that may be struggling for food may be tempted to use more or willing to pay for more to pay for climate information compared to those that are not struggling for food. Access to television and ready markets and regular remittances were all some of the other factors that we found to be influencing access to or willingness to pay for climate information. Ready markets, for that matter, farmers in this part of the country sometimes also have difficulties in terms of the marketing of their produce. I remember in one of our field visits, we visited the rice, the tonal rice is in close by Navrongo, and there are issues in terms of marketing and other things. And it's quite important that farmers who have to wait for several months to get water, once they get some water to produce their crops, when it comes to marketing, they may be having difficulties to do that. So why do we need to co-produce farmers, to co-produce climate information with end users? I want to spend some few minutes here to highlight this. The first thing that comes to mind is that when we co-produce climate information with, let me see if my video. When we co-produce climate information with the end users and farmers in this instance, what happens is that it ensures inclusiveness. Farmers feel that they are being included in the overall framework of climate information production. And for that matter, they see it as a collaborative process between them and the producers of climate information. One of the things that I highlighted as a barrier was the reliability, and then how farmers sometimes lack trust in the climate information produced. But if we co-produce such information with them, what we found out is that they are more likely to own such information, and eventually it will ensure greater uptake of such information for farm decision-making in terms of adaptation to climate change and climate variability. Of course, I mean, it's been established in the literature the importance of climate information to help farmers to address both in Africa, even and then across Asia and many parts of the globe. So when farmers are involved, or when end users are involved in the co-production of climate information, they see it as part of being part of producing that kind of information, and therefore it ensures greater uptake. And this is what we are doing in SWIFT. We're trying to see how we can do that with farmers and other end users in the fishing communities in other parts of the country, other parts of the other partner countries in Senegal and the rest. Then, more importantly, when we produce climate information with farmers, it helps us to integrate some of their local indigenous agroecological knowledge where possible. Sometimes we tend to downplay the importance of this agroecological knowledge, but farmers, we need to be aware that farmers are able to plan most of the things that they do based on the happenings around the agroecology. As I indicated earlier, the appearance of certain bird species in the air, the flowering of certain plant species also give indication that indeed the rain will either come very soon or will have impending drought on its way. Then finally, it makes climate information more attractive to end users, and this sums it up because they've been part of the process. They know where it started and how it ended. They are able to they see the end product to be more attractive to them, and they are willing to own it and then use it as part of their farming operations. In conclusion, I want to suggest that climate information indeed has the potential to direct and guide adaptation practices towards climate change for national development. We need to ensure that this information is made available to the smallholder, vulnerable smallholder farmer to build its adaptive capacity in the face of changing rainfall and temperature patterns. But we also need to be aware that there are barriers that militate against the successful uptake of this climate information, including lack of trust in the climate information or reliability, inadequate information on seasonal forecasts for long-term planning, high levels of illiteracy in the study communities amongst most of our farmers, timeliness of climate forecast. Sometimes by the time the information gets to the farmer, is no longer of use. When do they start? When is the onset of the rain? If you don't get it before the onset of the rain and or of the season, it's no longer useful because they've already planted their crops and they've taken a lot of risk. And we need to co-produce information, climate information with farmers so that we are aware of their needs and we produce what they need so as to satisfy them in terms of what they need, in terms of distribution of the rains during the farming season, in terms of moisture content. If we are able to do that, when we are able to do some of these things, then we'll reduce the expectations of the farmer in terms of what they need as against what is being produced and sending to them to use. So I'm sure there are ways of going around this, and one of the best way is to co-produce climate information with the end user, and in the case of what I'm presenting with agriculture being focused, to produce it with farmers. Our funding suggests that there are significant differences in terms of the socioeconomic predictors of climate information assets, as well as willingness to pay for climate information by smallholder farmers, especially using the case study of the northeastern Ghana, the Upper East region to be precise. This therefore has implications for the way we design our policies, especially for agricultural and environmental planning bodies, EPA, Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, and even Ghana Met Services. We need to avoid one-size-fits-all climate policies or climate service delivery, and make sure that climate information service delivery are tailored to meet the needs of different socioeconomic groups, including different male and female farmers, as their needs may differ based on their peculiar socioeconomic circumstances. Recommendations, we want to highlight that forecast information should be communicated in local languages where possible, because this is easily understood and appreciated by smallholder farmers if it is done that way. And the communication of climate information should also be directly linked to agronomic advice to make such information usable by smallholder farmers. I always cite this example. If we say that we are expecting 800 mm of rainfall in the Upper East in the coming season, what does that mean? It means absolutely nothing to a smallholder farmer who lives in Zibila or Boko or Manga or any of such places. We need to link what this means to agronomic advice. And to do that, I don't expect GMET to do that, but there needs to be a closer collaboration between our Met Service and then Ministry of Food and Agriculture, especially the Extension Unit and the Climate Change Unit. Can we work together so that whatever information is given, I am aware that sometimes some of this information is given at workshops, the seasonal forecast, but can we build a closer collaboration so as to be able to make sure that whatever information we are giving, we provide agronomic advice in terms of what it means for the farmer. So if we are expecting 800 mm, does that mean we have a low rainfall? Are we going to have average rainfall? Are we going to have more rainfall than usual? And what is the distribution like? If you are going to have less rainfall than usual, it means that farmers need to be advised in terms of the crop choices. They go in for short season early maturing varieties of crops, crops varieties that may not consume too much water or that may not need too much water in the course of their growth. So there should be some kind of agronomic advice to make such information attractive and usable to the smallholder farmers. And then finally, we also need to co-produce climate information with farmers where possible and integrate their local indigenous knowledge so that they will own and it will ensure greater uptake of whatever information we have produced for them. Let me acknowledge that this work presented was part of a fellowship that I did, which has just ended through the Climate Research for Development postdoctoral fellowship funded by African Academy of Sciences. And then the African Straight Project has also been quite helpful, and most of the things that have been presented have been done within the framework of the African Straight Project. And we are also grateful to the study communities that participated in this research. And let me particularly take this opportunity to thank GMET, the director, and the team, Sapotophy, for always allowing Maureen to go with us whenever we need to make presentations. And Maureen's presentations has always been very influential, very well welcome, accepted by the participants. On that note, thank you very much for listening to me this morning. God richly bless us all.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your wonderful presentation. It's time for question and answers. I think there is a question here. Prof, the first question.
Sure. Also learning from your friends and all that. So
was cost identified as one of the factors that influence?
Please, there's Bashilu, there's some noise. I think mute those who are not asking questions so that I can hear you, please.
Okay. Okay. The question is, was cost identified as one of the factors that influence the access or uptick of the forecast?
Cost, okay. Yeah, okay. Can I take about 2 or 3 questions and then I'll respond them if there are further questions?
Okay. This is the first question. I've not seen anyone raising his hand for question.
Okay. So
my hand is up.
Okay.
Prof, you can.
Provost answer.
Yeah, so I was particular about the co-production of the climate information. So can you give us some examples of the co-production that you are referring to? It's an interesting thing and will be very for the farmers. The only one that I saw, I understand, is how producing this, making sure that the information are produced in a local language, accessible to it. But apart from that, what are the for example, a literate farmer? What other thing can you do in terms of the co-production?
Okay. Any other question? Otherwise, okay, let me respond to these 2. Yeah, Bashiru too was went with us a couple of, I think, one time to the north, Tamale. Bashiru, cost, what we examine, we did not see cost as a major determining factor. Maybe we did not examine that. The idea, if you wanted to examine cost, then you need to propose a number of options to farmers and see which of them are they willing to pay. But let me say that, the mentality is that climate information should be free, and it should be borne. The cost of the production should be borne by the government. and this sometimes raises the issue of cost. But I'm also aware that there are some private companies that are doing some of these things, especially as I mentioned earlier, Isoko. I know they are doing it because there was a workshop I organized in Kumasi and they came, and then I think Farmerland also is also doing that. So even though cost was not examined or explored in our study, we are aware that cost may be a factor, especially when in Ghana, most people think that some of these things should be free. And if you want to share, if you want to pay them to pay, then you need to tailor the information in such a way that it will induce them to make some kind of financial commitment to assess such information. I hope that answers your question. And then Prof. Amekuji also asked a question in terms of the co-production. What are some of the specifics? I think when she was asking the question, there was some background noise. But in addition to what I highlighted, I think we also need to make sure, apart from the indigenous knowledge or agroecological knowledge, there are issues pertaining to the language. Local, can we use their local dialect? Because the issue with technical nature of the information was also highlighted as one of the key things that sometimes militate against uptake of climate information by smallholder farmers in the study communities. Then, of course, it comes back also to cost. So 3 key elements that I will mention are the local knowledge, local language, and then the cost element that needs to be considered when we want to co-produce climate information with smallholder farmers and whatever end users that we may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
much. I think DJ's hand is up.
Please. Yes, DJ, please, can you ask your question, DJ?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I think really, I wanted to know what type of farmers we are dealing with here. Are they tree crop farmers or they are the leguminous type of farmers? Because it's also very critical to know so that we can be able to really address some of these issues better. And then I also want to state that when it comes to farming or agriculture, it is not the amount of rainfall that is more important. It is the distribution of rainfall. So you might have some few amounts of rainfall, but if the distribution comes the way they should come at the right time, because every crop has some 3 stages, the vegetative, the flowering, and then the maturity stage. So it depends upon when the rainfall is being distributed. If we can get those things, and the amount of rainfall really does not really matter here, which I think that we can also look at those things critically. But I would want to know what type of farmers did you use in your study here? Are they mango? Because we have got the mango farmers, the other type of farmers, the pineapples and other things, so that we will be able to understand and then be able to, Meteo should be able to do some tailored form of forecast to the farmer, because it's very, very critical we know this information. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, DJ and Mr. Dr. Tanu. Thank you very much. I appreciate your contribution. Definitely, it's not how much water or rainfall that comes. The most important thing is the distribution. Is the rainfall well distributed? If they are going to have 800 mm, and if it comes, yesterday I was teaching some of my students, I was mentioning it. If it comes within 2 months, is it that useful? Or within 2 weeks, is that useful compared to this being distributed across the 4 months or 5 months of farming season in this part of the country? So that is why I mentioned that we need to be able to tell them the distribution of the rainfall during the season, because that will help them in terms of the kind of crop varieties that they may want to grow. So you are spot on. It's quite important that we are all aware that the amount is not that necessary. Sometimes it rains too much within a short period of time, and it causes a lot of havoc in the Upper East region. I remember there was a time we were going to Bolga, and just before Palugu, when we were going, there's a river there. I've forgotten the river that separates Upper East from the Northern region. It wasn't, we didn't see too much water in the river. When we went, it started raining after 1 week. When we were coming, the whole place was flooded. And I was just asking myself, if you are a farmer in Bulugu or any community nearby, what does this mean for your crops? So the distribution is quite important. And then in terms of the type of farming that we use, these were cereal cross farmers who were growing maize, millet, sorghum, and some of the other types, beans, the various types of beans and the rest. So they were not tree crop farmers, but these were farmers who were growing cereal crops and some amount of leguminous crops in as part of their farming activities. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Prof.
Well, the next question, I think, Samuel, do you want to ask a question?
Hello.
Hello, Samuel.
Yeah,
Samuel.
Yeah, I actually posted my question on the platform, but okay, let me go ahead and then read. I wanted to know the linkage between the fact that radio has the highest means of dissemination, maybe in terms of climate information to the farmers, how they easily get their climate information. And also the same research has found out that the barrier to this accessibility of climate is about 78.2%. So I wanted to know the linkage between these two, because we are saying the highest form of mode of dissemination is radio. And now we are also saying that the barriers has about 78.2%. I just want to know the relation. Thank you.
I also want to ask another question. Can I? So like
okay, Prof.
Yes, Prof.
Okay. Mine is about, do you assess, the use of SMS message, the phone for receiving climate information? How advanced is that in your study region? And
okay,
that this will become critical, knowing now that everybody uses a phone, and yeah.
Okay, so yeah, let me start with Samuel. What we found out was that we wanted to find out how are farmers receiving the information and radio. So we did a literature review and then look at the possible means by which they accept this thing in some of these dryland farming systems, and we presented this to them. And we amended some of the questions during the initial workshops with the stakeholders. So radio was reported as the #1 means by which, or medium by which, farmers receive climate information across the 6 study areas, which were scattered all over the Upper East region, if you know the Upper East region properly. So that was the first part that we established, but it's not contradictory to the barriers. The barriers, we wanted to find out what then prevent them from using the information, and some of them indicated that there was a lack of accessibility to climate information. If you don't have radios, if you don't have television, you cannot get access to it. And let me highlight that this question was people, respondents has opportunity to select multiple responses. So the percentage that you are seeing, it was because of the multiple responses, but it's not contradictory to the fact that it was the most, that is what most of them were receiving it. But that is what becomes a barrier in terms of constraining the uptake of climate information within these study communities. So this was a multiple responses where farmers could indicate a number of the barriers, and not that each farmer was asked to indicate one particular barrier. I hope that answers the question. And then Prof, could you also ask whether we examine, yes, social media was also given, I think that was about just about 2.1%. That was quite low in terms of people who said they were using social media. I think what is happening is that Isoko and Farmland and such other private companies, they either record or send text messages to those who they are providing some of these services to. And some of them were also saying that they use AccuWeather on their on their mobile phone to be able to access that. But then it's critical that the way we are moving now, we need to be able to consider how can we deliver some of this information to social media. Prof, if you remember when we went to Senegal at the beginning of SWIFT, I think 2016 or 17, Senegal, they mentioned that they use some of this. I remember Awa, who was in charge of that, Awa, and then they mentioned that they use some of this, they record some of this and then share it on people's social media or as voice messages to farmers, especially the fishing community. And I think it's high time we begin to look more into this and see how we can use social media, because now almost every household has some form of phone or communication gadget that we can use to reach out to them. Mobile phone is now very popular, and we need to exploit that option of disseminating climate information through that. But it comes with cost, and there should be closer collaboration. And likely, if we can get some of these telecos to be part of the kind of thing that we are doing. Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That can become a means to generate some income for GMET, because if we need to get some proposal with the telecos so that there's some service as they provide that. So maybe one thing, if not yet explore, we can also look at to generate income for generating climate information and dissemination.
Thank you. Another question, Prof. There. Joachim Ayu has a question. Please, can you ask?
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. I work with Water Resources Commission. Thanks for the nice presentation. My greatest concern, if you can go back to the slide you showed before this one, about the percentage with regards to the one you showed before this one. Not, okay, but let me just go on, not this one, but just to say that, was there a link between the information disseminated and how realistic that information is to the farmer or the local householder in that part of the country? Because I have worked in that area for close to 8 years, and I can tell you that sometimes you get information that they will tell you we are getting this, the farmer prepares and something different comes. So we need to know whether that kind of information was also turned out, so that we can see how we can make it more reliable for the farmer or the local user at that level. Thank you.
Okay. Any hand up, or should I answer this in Bashir?
Jeremiah, you can ask your question. Lazia, you can ask your question, please. Samuel, can you unmute him? Prof, you can answer.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, my brother. Yes, you know, there is one thing making this information available to farmers, and another thing, farmers using the information that has been disseminated. It's difficult to just tell that once farmers get this information, they will use it. So what we did was that if you look at, I think, let me show you this table. We wanted to find out those who said they were receiving information. We wanted to see if they were indeed receiving the information, what were they using the information for? Because if there's no linkage between the dissemination and then uptake in terms of decision making, then it doesn't yield any good results. And this was what led to this table, where a lot of them, or a number of them, mentioned that they use it to make decisions on especially land preparation, and then the type of crop variety that they need to plant for that matter. But I think we need to also look at what factors may not allow them to use such information. And one of the things that the essence of this presentation is to drum home the need to co-produce climate information with farmers. Once climate information is produced with farmers, as I indicated earlier, there's the greater chance or possibility that farmers will see themselves as being part of the generation of such information, and therefore they will own that kind of information, and that will ensure, or that will result in greater uptake of this decision in their farm management and crop choices making. So we need to be always aware that the dissemination does not necessarily lead to the uptake of the information in terms of making choices, but this was what we found out, that they were using it to make some kind of crop management decision making. Thank you very much, my brother from Water Resources Commission.
Lazia, you can ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. My question is about the percentage of extension officers having climate information. So is it that you don't have much extension officers around that area, or the extension officers themselves don't have climate information? That's what I want to know. Because they are supposed to advise farmers on what to do. So you don't have if you don't have the information, then I just want to know that whether they don't have information or they don't have access to the information.
Two things. You know, the extension farmers, they also have, I think the ministry has, they have a WhatsApp platform where they get the information. It goes to the regional to director shares it with the extension agents within the district, you know, or the region. The region has regional extension officer, and then the district also has a regional district extension officer, and then who has a number of extension agents under them. But sometimes they also, apart from this delivery mechanism, they also rely on the public distance for information. But the idea is that the extension officers, the numbers are also woefully inadequate. I think you mentioned that. If you look at the number of extension officers to farmer ratio in the country, is woefully inadequate. One farmer serving so many communities. In one of the paper that we wrote from this study, we looked at how do we build the capacity of extension officers to address climate change. Maureen, you know, the final workshop we had at Bogatanga in February last year, it was only for extension agents from about 16 districts across the Upper East region, across the Upper East region. And we realized that we asked them how many communities were they serving, and some of them were serving up to 20 communities. One extension officer serving up to 20 communities. And you are likely to find sometimes 300, 500 farmers in a particular community. So how do you expect that farmer to be able to deliver information on time? Even if he received the information, if some of these people are not on mobile phone, how does he communicate to them? By the time he gets his motto and gets the information is no longer useful. And they are also impeded in terms of access to the farming communities. Some of them may not necessarily have the necessary motorbikes. Some have, but not all of them who have motorbikes. And even sometimes, according to them, when they have the motorbikes, the road to these places are such that it becomes difficult that you can even sometimes get easy access to some of these places. So in short, the numbers of extension officers across the country are woefully inadequate. I think I don't have the exact ratio with me of head, but it's woefully inadequate. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you. Nuruddin, please, you can ask your question, Nuruddin.
Yeah, Prof, I would like to know whether this information received by the farmers was specific, because specific information will produce specific results. Again, we know that farmers regularly have to.
What do you mean by specific? Can you?
What I mean is that the information whether it was directly for the farmers, it was just a general information they receive and decide on what to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you were saying something before I interrupted, please.
Yeah, I want to say that I just wanted to add an information to what I said, that farmers regularly have to contend with wet and dry events to grow crops. So if we know that the information, it is important to know whether it was specific or it was just a general information out there for them to decide on how to use it.
Yes, I think my colleagues from UH will be helpful. I think they produce some kind of seasonal forecast, and this seasonal forecast I think are given through workshops. I was in Nigeria as part of SWIFT last 2 years, and they do very well. They gave us some of their bushes that they produce, and I think GMET is also doing same. So in that regard, some of the seasonal forecast, the information is delivered to them directly. But otherwise, sometimes they have to contend with what is given to the general public. If at the end of the news, the farmer, the forecaster comes in and gives the daily forecast or the weekly forecast, I think it's not specific to farmers. This is information to the general public, and then farmers, because their farming operations are dependent on rainfall and temperature patterns, they quickly look at it and see what are the implications for them. That was why I mentioned that, is it possible to provide some of these specific forecasts and link them directly to farm management practices? There should be agronomic advice in terms of whatever forecast we are giving means for the farmer in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. There are some questions. Al-Hassan Isahaku is asking, he's saying, have you come across any specific cases of co-production that you could share? I think this question was asked by Professor Amekuji.
Yeah, I think it was us, and I tried to explain that. But I've seen somebody's hand up. I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
It's me.
Prof. Lamptey, you can ask.
Yeah, I want to look at I was expecting the GMET guys to talk about those targeted forecasts, because there's a project and targeted forecast is being given because they are working hand in hand with the farmers, and the extension officers. So the extension office, they specify exactly what they want, and GMET produces what they want for them. So those ones are very targeted. And that is ongoing at the moment. So I was expecting GMET to come in. And that aside, we have the general case where the information is just provided. But there are also, most of the time, the targeted forecasts are done within projects. So it's not a normal forecast, but it's very targeted. And those are done within framework of various projects. So both of them are there. They are the targeted ones, and they are the general public forecast. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I think, Ben, you are right. That was why I mentioned that when I was starting my answering, I mentioned that I hope my colleagues from GMET will come in and then provide some backup in terms of explanation. So Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you for.
And I think I also need to mention that I think I mean, nobody knows what is happening now because of the deep cuts to GCRF. Otherwise, you know, the last time I was in Leeds, that Parker and Code, I think they were looking at business model in terms of how we could model some of this specific information and deliver to farmers and other, not only farmers, but to other end users in the energy, telecom, and other sectors. But then we need to be aware that the GMET is doing something like that in terms of the specific forecast being given to farmers. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you. Please, participants, can you please visit the chat session for those who have not registered so that we can take some data there. Thank you. Prof, my question is, in one of your points, you said inadequate information on seasonal forecast for long-term planning. Is it that the parameters being forecasted are inadequate, or the forecast is not detailed enough to give them information for their long-term planning? And my second question too is the lack of reliability of the climate information. Is it that they receive the information, but the information turned out to be something that did not benefit them or something?
Okay, Bashiru, thank you very much. In terms of the inadequate planning, you know, I mentioned, and then Director graciously also added that it's not how much rainfall is coming that is important to the farmer, it's the distribution. Is that okay? So farmers want to know how the distribution will be like. If you're able to tell them how the distribution will be like, the onset, the cessation time, then it will inform them to make long-term decisions in terms of when do they expect to plant, harvest, and what will be the distribution like when it's about time to harvest. For instance, as the example I gave, that the rain washed off most of the farmers who had grown rice around the Palugu and the Wulugu. What I mean, if there was that information available to them, of course, I also need to acknowledge that it's not only the amount of rain, but the opening of the dam in Burkina Faso. If they had information that when it was about time for them to harvest, they were going to experience this, then they will not go in for crop varieties that will be on the field up to that point, but then they'll go in for short, early maturing varieties of crops, such that by the time some of these things happen, they've already harvested their crops. It's very heartbreaking for some of these farmers because they have to wait so much for the rains to come, and when the rains come, they as somebody said, they contend with dry and wet season. When the rain eventually comes, they plant their crops, and when they're about harvesting, because they don't have long-term information, things happen and they lose. Some of them lose everything, and it's quite heartbreaking. And then you also mentioned whether is it that they don't receive the information or they don't. The idea is that, you know, sometimes some of these things are because of their past experience. Is that okay? I don't know whether you were in my class, but those that have been in my class before, anytime I'm teaching some of this thing for the med science students, I use the example of what happened, I think in 2016 or so, when the National Independence Day there was rain and the president was about delivering his speech.
Yes.
I use if you have been in my class before, I use that as an example. I am told that the person who was on duty that day, as time for correction, you are work at the GMET, provided information that it was going to rain, but yet people didn't believe in the information because maybe in the past they've had situations where there have been forecasts that it was going to rain and it didn't rain. And I've mentioned in one of my presentation slides that you cannot blame GMET because the tropic, I'm not a meteorologist, but what I'm aware is that tropical forecasting tropical weather is quite difficult because of the complex nature of the various phenomena and forces. So and sometimes if you say to rain in the Upper East, is that okay? There was, let me give you this, I'm talking to my, but let me give you this typical example. I had a workshop in Bolgatanga last October, and then there was an experience from the regional director who mentioned that he was visiting Busa, I think Busa North or so. When they were leaving Navrongo, there was no rain. And Bolga, there was no rain. Navrongo, there was no rain. They got to Chuchuluga before they could hit that place. It was raining. They came back to Navrongo and there was no rain. Bolga, there was no rain. If the forecast has been that it was going to rain in Upper East, somebody living in Bolga and Navrongo would have said that it didn't rain. But somebody living in Chuchuluga and beyond, Sandima and beyond, would have experienced the rain, and his perception will be different from somebody who lives in Navrongo and Bolga. And this is a place with similar weather, climate characteristics and those kind of things. So we need to be aware that some of these things are informed by people's previous experience when forecast has not materialized in their specific locality, and you cannot blame anybody for that. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Felix Kenepu is asking, did you also consider the cost-profit linkage to the effective uptake of this adaptation practice by smallholder farmers?
The cost-profit linkage to effective uptake of this adaptation practice by smallholder farmers. Well, I mean, we did not do that. We did not do profit cost-benefit analysis or something of that sort. And I think these are some of the things that we can look at. And of course, some students who are now looking to see what are some of the cost-benefit analysis in terms of using some climate smart agricultural interventions, and climate information could be one of them. But I need to mention that climate information will be a very complex thing to do, because where is the cost and what elements will constitute the cost before you can even get the profit. So we can do for some other climate smart agricultural interventions where you need to pay for obvious costs, but we can also give a hypothetical cost element to some of the stages of the production and dissemination of climate information. Thank you very much.
Okay. Please, any other question? Please, have we all registered?
Dr. Lamte's hand is up. Professor Lamte.
Prof. But sorry, I guess
it's from the previous. It's from the previous time that I asked the question.
Okay, all right.
Basilu, I guess I also need to register, or I don't need to register?
Yeah, you have to register. Any other information?
Can I say something?
Yes, Prof.
I think that is this in ending this information, we have to talk about the National Framework for Climate Services.
Yes.
Because the issue is, what is the way forward given these challenges? We have to talk about suggested solutions, and one of the possible avenues will be to synthesize people on the National Framework for Climate Services, because the dialogue platform offers opportunity for co-production. And if people are aware of that and we use that, it will reduce some of the challenges. So I think that Philip is in that area. He can talk about that as well, so people become aware of that, of the National Framework for Climate Services. And the GMET guys, I think you are too quiet. You have to say some of these things.
Yes.
Director General is around. Director General is around.
Can I say something?
Yes, Prof. Yes, Doc, you can say something.
Now, I think what happened is that if you look at the WMO is pushing at, I think we have to, GMET can be working with the academia in some of these areas. So I think this forum, as it has been made to operate, is something that we can, and I think with this thing that we have with tech, we signed this, and I think mainly it was with the Department of Physics. We signed some form of collaboration, like in the form of MOU. And if really we can look at some of these topics and research into some of these things, it definitely have to help us, because WMO is going on the GWE, Global Weather Enterprise, which involves the academia, the Met services, and even the private sector. So I think it's something that we have to forge on that. And then some research work and other things could be incorporated into to improve. I'm not saying that GMET is doing 100% perfect on some of these things, but it is work that we work together. And also the idea of rainfall, the focus that we give is, as Prof said, it's a bit broader. And if we can really, tone it down to various and specific areas, which is a bit difficult, a challenge that we need to address. That will help us very much, because as Prof said rightly, you might say that it's going to rain in the north, but which part of the north is the rain coming, is going to affect? Maybe it is affecting, we said Accra, but Accra is so big that you might have it in Laboni, but you might not see it in Medina, and you say that it is rain. Somebody will say that, yes, it didn't. So those are kind of things that we really have to, and we'll work on that thing, but we'll plead that we'll pledge that we can work with academia in this regard to be able to help address some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Basilu, can I say something with regards to the national framework? As part of this work, there was the initial aspect of this work that I presented was to look at how climate information, the extent to which climate information has been incorporated into the national frameworks, national climate change facing policies and plans of Anglophone West African countries. So we did an extensive analysis, documentary analysis of all the, for Ghana, we did the national adaptation policy, national adaptation strategy, UNF communication to UNFCCC. We did for the Paris, the nationally determined contribution. We did similar for Nigeria, Liberia, the Gambia, and then Sierra Leone. So, and we found out that, and then also did some regional level documents like the African Union's Agenda 2063, and then the ECOWAS land policy and others. And we found out that climate information was, climate change was recognized as a serious threat, but yet climate information is not given serious consideration in these policy documents. That paper, luckily enough, I'm sure is in press, and I'm told this weekend will be released in climate services by SAVIA. I'll share with you. So one of the key US comment was that we needed to acknowledge the work being done through the National Framework for Climate Services. And we need to now look at what the various countries have done in terms of the establishment of climate services. And if you go to the WMO website, it shows each country and where they are in terms of the development of national climate information services. And I'm aware that the doctor, I think there's Dr. Ama Kuzi at Legon is leading, working with the GMET. I was even meant to be part of the last workshop. I couldn't, but I think we are doing well in terms of that. Senegal, I think it's only Senegal which may be ahead of us. Senegal has already launched theirs, and they're about implementing it. And we have done the initial consultation, and I'm sure once we provide the action plan in terms of the cost element of those kind of things, we are doing well, and we need to acknowledge that and highlight some of these things in the National Framework for Climate Services. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have 5 minutes left. I have one question to ask. Since you mentioned the National Framework for Climate Services and the National Determined Contribution, please, Prof, what is the linkage between these two?
What? National what?
National Framework for Climate Services and the National Determined Contributions.
No, the National Determined Contribution is what parties to the Paris Climate Agreement agreed to submit in terms of their adaptation and mitigation commitment. You know, prior to the Paris Climate Agreement, countries were given some targets to achieve, but as part of the Kyoto and then other protocols, the United Nations Convention for Climate Change, and but they felt that it wasn't working. So instead of that top-down approach, they now adopted a bottom-up approach where countries now tell the UNF, the Paris Agreement, what they think they can contribute in terms of mitigating the effects of climate change. And so you highlight your adaptations options, you highlight your mitigation options. And in Ghana, we presented, I think, seven priority sectors: agriculture, energy, water, waste, health, transport, and disaster risk. We are currently revising the what we call NDCs, National Determined Contributions, and GMET has been part of the discussions. I think sometimes Naomi used to attend the meetings, and but last time I was telling you when we had a meeting, and so that is the NDC, and then we also have the National Framework for Climate Services that is supposed to guide how climate services should work in the country. But I think there's a clause within the National Framework by the WMO which suggests that it will help in the attainment of the commitments made under the NDCs by countries who are party to or who have signed up to the Paris Climate Agreement. So that is the link. This one is the global decision, and this one is done at the national level by the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's almost time. We would like everybody to put on his camera so we will take a group picture. And Dr. Tanu would like you to give us a closing remarks. Hello, Doc.
Yeah, I think we have to thank Professor Antwi-Agyei for a wonderful presentation that he gave us. And he has really thrown some insight and some challenges too. There are things that I think GMET has to do with regards to our forecasts and other things. Because some of these forecasts should be tailor-made in a way. And that is why I was asking what type of farmers we were dealing with here. Because I remember when we were doing the National Climate Service Forum, where we had those gentlemen from WMO and ECOWAS coming in here. We traveled even to Somenya to interact with some of the mango farmers there. So it is something that we really have to take very serious view with. But I will believe that I think the universities, like particularly Professor Antwi-Agyei's section, and then the physics department, once we are all with, I mean, the SWIFT project is happening in this regard. We should be able to work, I mean, together to be able to achieve this. And we also have to take the National Framework for Climate Services, which already WMO has helped us to push through, so that we'll be able to get some solid committee to work for Ghana. There are some few challenges because of what was prevailing before, but I think that we should, GMET should take this thing up, and which I believe that we will start working on it seriously, and with the help, with the use of Dr. Nanama Kruche, I think we are still on, and we have to really maybe strengthen it a little bit. But on the whole, I think this forum to me is a very good thing that we all have to take seriously, so that in the end, it is the entire Ghana community which enjoys. So we thank everybody for coming, and we believe that we'll be having subsequent topics which will be relevant to help and will help improve the services of GMET, so that Ghana will take its proper stage in the ECOWAS, the sub-region, because people are looking at Ghana as a model. I mean, even Nigeria is there, but if you can really do our things a bit better, we should be able to be recognized as such. On that note, I thank everybody for coming and participating in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Samuel, have you taken the pictures? Dr. Jeff, the group pictures?
Yes, I've taken some, but then if the rest could just turn on their cams, and then we just take one general one.
Okay.
Okay, so it's done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for attending this very important meeting. So we thank you very much. We'll meet next month, God willing. Thank you.
Last month's lecture, we haven't gotten the audio yet. So.
We will send the audio as well as the video.
Thank you.
I'm a who?
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Charlie, I was giving you a hint to add to the listening. Sorry.